I think in pictures. Pictures is my first language, and, English is my second language. When I read a book, I translate it into a movie in my head, complete with pictures and sound. It's as if you took a video camera and you just plugged it in right here, and you could just play the whole finished thing real. I can be a cow walking through that system. I can be a person walking up and down the catwalk. I could be in a helicopter over the system. It's just that simple. It's just like having a videotape of it in your head. People get all excited about the virtual reality things that they're doing now on computers. I can't be excited about that. It's like just cartoon garbage compared to what I can do. Nature is harsh. A modern slaughterhouse is much more gentle than nature is. You've all probably watched these things on National Geographic. Some lion is eating somebody's guts out. When I get old and die, I'd much rather go to one of my meatpacking plants than have a lion eat my guts out. I was extremely oversensitive to sound and oversensitive to touch. Too much touch hurt. Certain loud noises hurt my ears like a dentist drill going right through my head. Like a jackhammer in my ear, I can remember flinging myself down on the floor and crying. Scratchy petticoats felt like sandpaper just rubbing off raw nerve endings. School bells. It was like an overwhelming tidal wave of stimulation. It'd be like being in a pinball machine. I can also remember the frustration of not being able to talk. I could understand what people said to me if they talked slowly, but I couldn't get my words out. Sometimes I'd throw a tantrum because screaming was the only way I could talk. I started getting these terrible anxiety attacks. One of the things is I didn't realize that, my senses were different. I thought somehow other people were just better and stronger and able to tolerate these things better. It felt like a constant state of stage fright all the time for no reason. When I went out and visited my aunt's ranch, they would put the cattle in a device called the squeeze chute for veterinary work. I noticed when the animals went in the squeeze chute that some of the cattle kind of relaxed. And I was desperate for relief from this terrible constant anxiety I had. And so I thought, well, I wonder what happened if I got in there. So I talked my aunt into putting me in the squeeze chute. And it wasn't very comfortable, but the pressure actually calmed down my nerves. And for 45 minutes after being in the squeeze chute, I was calm. So I started reviewing the scientific literature. And since then, working on development of more humane restraint devices. I find that if you put just the right amount of pressure on the cattle, and it's like all over their body, and it's not too tight and it's not too loose, the animal will just kind of relax. If you make it too tight, it hurts. If you don't make it tight enough, then he doesn't feel held and then he fights it. And if I let the soothing feeling just wash over me, any bad thoughts in my head, it just gets rid of them. You have to feel that nice feeling of being held in order to have nice, kind thoughts. Sometimes I look at it sort of as a neurotransmitter adjustment. I've got to get the good neurotransmitters going in my brain. I have to think about making myself relax. I almost talk to myself when I'm in it. I just kind of keep saying to myself, you gotta just give in to it. Completely let go. You gotta just completely give in to it. Of course, a lot of the psychologists, wanted to take it away from me when I was in high school and college. They wanted me to give it up so I'd be sort of, quote, more normal. Oh, they just made up all kinds of Freudian nonsense, and I wouldn't give it up. And I'm glad I didn't. A lot of autistic people are attracted to interesting visual things. Things that move. When I was a little kid, I loved flags. Lots of autistic kids love flags.
Well, recently there's been a great deal of careful research and study into the subject of the accuracy of the senses, and the results have been quite amazing. The scientist, Adelbert Ames, has developed some ingenious experiments. In this figure,
well, I was really fascinated by two optical illusions, the Ames distorted room and the Ames trapezoid window. I was in high school at the time, and I saw these on a Bell Labs movie about optical illusions, and I just thought that was so neat. How did they make this room where one person looks twice as big as the other person? And one of the science teachers used that as a way to motivate me in schoolwork and says, well, you ought to try to figure out how to make one of those. But he wouldn't just give me a book and show me how to do it. And then he gave me one hint. He let me look at a picture in a book for like 15 seconds. And then from that, I was able to figure out how to make the trapezoid window and the Ames distorted room illusion work. And of course, being, typical autistic, then I got kind of hung up on it. Since I think just in pictures, it's sort of hard to think about abstract concepts. So I have to have visual images. Like, for example, when I was a little child, I didn't really understand some of the stuff in the Lord's Prayer, and then they would talk about the power and the glory. And I thought, electrical high-tension lines, circular rainbow, thou art in heaven, that didn't even make any sense to me. But another autistic person says, well, I always pictured God up in heaven with an easel. And I got to thinking about, well, I've got to leave, high school and go on to college. So I found this little door that went out on the roof that symbolized going on to the next step. And I used to practice going through the door because it made something visual and concrete to symbolize something sort of abstract, like going on to the next step in life. I'm a person who's totally logical, so I look to science to try to explain things. It would be really nice to be able to just believe that you went to heaven. And when I read all the near-death experiences about people, seeing heaven, I thought, oh boy, I can now really believe that. That's been sort of scientifically proven. Then one day I read an article in Scientific American about hallucinations and about what happens to oxygen-starved brains, and that when brains get starved of oxygen, they see certain things like tunnels and spiral lattice things. So I went back through all those books about near-death experience, and I wrote down the cause of death. Okay, heart attack, hemorrhage, And almost all of the cases were caused by lack of oxygen to the brain. You know, I would tend to believe it a lot better if somebody got the occipital cortex completely destroyed, the whole back of the head blown off, then I'd believe it. When I first tried to visit a slaughter plant, they wouldn't let me in. And I thought, well, what's so mysterious in this place? They won't let anybody in. And I can remember driving my car around this plant as if it was Vatican City. I wanted to find out what happens when you die. Regular religion was way too abstract. It was just meaningless. But the slaughterhouse was real. I walked up to the front lobby and they said, no, we don't give tours of this plant. What? About 2 years later, I got to talking to a very nice lady, and I found out that she was the wife of the man who sold the insurance for the plant. 2 days later, I was in the Swift plant. The door to opportunity opened.
I thought you were
A friend of mine, thought you were my buddy.
I found out a short while ago your thoughts were dark and muddy. You scare me half to death, my friend, with the things you say and do. So I'm
Going to heaven in a flash of fire, with or without you. Going to heaven in a flash of fire, with or without you. About 1/3 of all the cattle in this country are handled in systems I've designed at major meat companies. And a system starts out with unloading the trucks. Then I've designed a series of pens where the cattle go in one end. They're then moved out of those herringbone pens and go through a curved chute system. They pass up a curved lane into a round crowding pen area. And then from that, it funnels down into a curved single-file chute. And I make all the lanes and alleys curved because I don't want the animals to get scared from seeing things up ahead that scare them, like people moving around up ahead. A curved chute also works better because as the cattle come around the curve, they think they're going back to where they came from. Curves utilize the natural circling behavior of the cattle. And I have one job I call my Guggenheim Museum job because they just go round and round and round in a spiral. And they just keep going around and round. They don't realize where they're going. Cattle like to stay together with their buddies, so they just keep following the rear end of the animal in front of them. They walk into this system and straddle a moving conveyor. Before they know it, they're just riding along, and it's got solid sides so they don't see out. So the only thing they see is their buddy in front of them. And then they're shot in the head with a captive bolt stunner that kills the animal instantly. Would have the same effect on it as a .45. Cattle will walk very, very calmly into this system, sort of like people walking down a jet bridge at the airport. If I can go to a meat plant and the cattle just walk in nice and calmly and they're not scared, that makes me happy. If I can go out on a ranch and they're handling some cattle at the ranch for their vaccinations, the animals will just stay, really calm and they're not scared. That makes me feel happy because I know what it's like to feel fearful and scared. I can visualize myself in their body. What would it feel like pushing up against the other cattle? What would seeing out their eyes be like? That doesn't mean I'm putting myself as a person in a cow costume. What would it be like if I actually was a cat? People that are most likely to deny animals thinking are people that think entirely in language. Some people, when I ask them questions like access your memory on dogs, access your memory on church steeples or cars or whatever, they don't see any pictures. Well, if you only thought in language, you'd have a hard time imagining that an animal could think. But if you think in pictures, well, then it's very easy to imagine. Figuring out how people act is just like figuring out how cattle act. And I had to observe and learn from practical experience that people didn't always do things in a predictable way. Like when I first started working at the Swift plant, I had this naive notion that everybody who worked for Swifts would be loyal to Swifts. Well, I found out that that wasn't always true, and sometimes ego and greed got in the way of things. And that was a real disillusionment. I get very turned on about knowledge and figuring out how to do things, figuring out how to design stuff. That really turns me on, to figure out how to solve a design problem. Once I get that layout drawn on the drawing, this is a real rough sketch, then I can actually see the whole system. And I'll say to the plant manager, you want it made in steel, you want it made in concrete, you want it made in concrete block, tell me what material you want to make it out of. I can visualize it in my mind. Everything dies. In order for one living thing to survive, another living thing has to die. A lot of people don't like to go in the slaughterhouse and see where the animals die because they don't like to think about that. It sort of makes you look at life in a different way. I think using animals for food is an ethical thing to do, but we've got to do it right. We've got to give those animals a decent life, and we've got to give them a painless death. We owe the animal respect.
Tell me about the whole story of Stairway to Heaven and where that comes from.
Well, I named my very first job the Stairway to Heaven. And that was a ramp system and restrainer system for the Swift plant in Arizona. And after the whole system was finished, I brought my blind college roommate over to the plant. And she stood up at the top of the ramp and touched the cattle as they walked up the ramp into the restrainer. And when she got home that night, she wrote a very nice prayer. And it said, the Stairway to Heaven. Maybe if I lean back more like this, or am I going to look weird if I...
No.
Okay, how about like this? Okay, do it now?
Yes.
The Stairway to Heaven is dedicated to those people who desire to learn the meaning of life and not to fear death. you through respect for these animals and come to respect your fellow man as well.
Are you afraid of death?
No, I'm not afraid of death. I sort of live my life as if maybe a truck might run over me tomorrow. I just hope that when I die, I will have done something of value. I mean, I realize my life's finite and that, I'm not going to be here forever.
Do you ever feel like yourself you're walking up that stairway to heaven?
Oh yeah, I've gone through the system many, many, many times. If everything's just going right, you just, go through the cattle and feel the conveyor pull me in and then it'd be over with. If everything's working right, I wouldn't feel a thing.